The next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. And I see Mr. Sanders at the back of the room. You haven't visited us for a while. Do you want to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You did a great job. The next item on the agenda is the agenda approval. Mike, do we have any changes to the agenda?
Mayor, we've been requested to move item 5U from consent to non-consent. Otherwise, there's no other changes.
Okay. Council, any other changes? Not, do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
I move.
Second.
A motion and a second discussion. Stand vote, please.
Pope.
Yes.
Reddy.
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Burkhart.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to public communications. We don't have any scheduled public communications this evening, but is there anyone in the audience who would like to address the council on an item that is not on the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to public hearings. We have several public hearings this evening. The first one is to conduct a public hearing and consider resolution number 23-215, approving and authorizing execution of an amendment number 2 to the agreement for private development by and between the City of Johnson and LSJT of Iowa, LLC. And we'll open this public hearing at 7:17.
Back in June of 2019, the city entered into a development agreement with LSJT of Iowa, represented by Steve Scott. This agreement covered the development or redevelopment of 3 parcels in the southwest corner of Northwest 54th Avenue, Northwest 86th Street, as shown on the parcel map that's displayed on the screen, parcel A, parcel B, and parcel C. We did do an amendment to that agreement back in 2020, in large part to address, COVID impacts to construction timelines and those types of things. Back in May of this year, we did also, I should back up and reference those actions, the original agreement and amendment number 1. All 3 of the parcels were in the Beaver Creek West urban renewal area underneath our tax increment financing program. In May of this year, we did do 2 actions where we eliminated parcels B and C, the green and red from the map, the undeveloped, currently unredeveloped parcels from the Beaver Creek West urban renewal area, leaving parcel A within that urban renewal area. The subsequent action we took that night was B and C were added into a new Northwest 86th Street urban renewal area, along with other properties along Northwest 86th Street that we're redeveloping or currently vacant. And so we strategically sort of separated the types of urban renewal areas we had between the Beaver Creek West and the Northwest 86th Street. That action requires a separation of the development agreement. And so this amendment number 2, the large part of amendment number 2 removes parcels B and C from the original development agreement. Our next public hearing will consider a new development agreement to cover the requirements and the incentives provided for the 2 redevelopment parcels B and parcel C. Parcel A requirements and incentives largely stay the same as what was included in the 2019 and 2020 amendment to the original development agreement. There was in the original development agreement, there was a requirement for a sit-down restaurant to be included in the building in Parcel A, which subsequently was leased by Iowa Ortho, which was allowed by that amendment number 1. In this amendment, we do recognize that and sort of put on notice that if Iowa Ortho were to vacate that building, the city's desire remains to have restaurant space within that facility. This agreement does not change the timelines for original development, original parcel A. And so with this amendment would terminate in 2029. So 10 years from the date of the original agreement. That's a very quick summary. Be happy to answer any questions that the council may have.
Council, have any questions for David?
David, I do have a question with regard to this and specifically that clause that you mentioned with regard to the sit-down restaurant. Is that wording, and I can't find it at the moment, but is that wording only for that corner location that's there? And perhaps the developer can chime in on this, but also from the standpoint of it's become aware that there is a vacancy or an opening. So does that sit-down restaurant apply to any usable spaces within that?
It's specific to the Iowa Ortho space. The corner space was designated originally as the restaurant sort of use, which is where Iowa Ortho ended up.
Okay.
Other questions for David? This is a public hearing on this item. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the council? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing then at 7:22. Do we have a motion to approve resolution number 23-215?
So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion. Sam, vote please.
Ready,
Yes.
Evans,
Yes.
Martin,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to item 4B, conduct a public hearing and consider resolution 23-216, approving and authorizing execution of a development agreement by and between the City of Johnston and LSJT of Iowa, LLC. And we'll open this public hearing at 7:23.
Good evening. As alluded to in the previous public hearing, these items are related, and this would be consideration of a new development agreement that would cover parcels B and C as they were originally identified in the 2019 agreement, which your previous action just amended. This action would sort of stipulate an investment into these two properties of approximately $37 million. Parcel B construction would be required to be completed by December of 2027. Parcel C construction completed by December of 2028. Along with the conditions on Parcel B, there are a number of additional items that are sort of laid out as expectations or requirements of the development of that parcel. Those include a minimum investment in a public art sculpture or sculptures or other forms of public art with a minimum value of $75,000. The building would be required to meet Green Globe criteria, which are similar to LEED type requirements, trying to get to a sustainable type structure. The structure would be required to have, again, this is specific to Parcel B, a minimum of a 14,000 square foot retail space on the main floor, as well as a 95,000 square foot enclosed and or structured parking with residential uses on the upper floors. All of those conditions, the Green Globe, the square footage of the commercial, the square footage of the parking, have sort of clawback provisions written into the development agreement that if those items aren't met, there are reductions into the incentives offered as an offset to not meeting those requirements. Additionally, electric lines along Northwest 86th Street adjacent to Parcel B would be required to be buried along that stretch of Northwest 86th Street. Parcel C would be required to construct a 6,000 square foot commercial building at a minimum. Exchange for those investments and requirements, the development agreement contemplates a 90% rebate over a 10-year period, a maximum amount on Parcel B of $4,550,000, and have a maximum amount on parcel C of $450,000. There are a lot of nuances in the and sort of as you get into those clawbacks and stuff that I talked about within the development agreement, but that's a general overview summary of the conditions of the development agreement. I would note, and it's important to note, that this action is really in developing memorializing the incentive package, the minimum improvements. We haven't had a site plan submitted. We haven't gone through that process. And so as development moves forward, there will be a site plan presented that'll look at everything from utilities to landscaping to architecture. There are certainly conceptual plans included in the staff report and included as attachments to the development agreement, but those all require separate action and approval of this council before that could occur. So with that, I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions of the council.
Council, have any questions for David?
I don't, David, I'm not familiar with the Green Globe program. Can you give me a very short description of what it's going to be asking of the developer in terms of this construction? Is it similar to the LEED?
Very similar to LEED. It's looking at the same types of things. I think energy consumption. Let me see if I can find the page. I think I flagged it here. Some of the things that are listed I'm on page 16 of the agreement that fall under Green Globes. A minimum of 40% of the roof is vegetated or has a high solar reflective index. A minimum of 25% of hardscape surfaces are shaded during summer months or has a high solar reflective index or uses permeable materials. A minimum of 50% of the lighting power for garage and or the parking lot lighting is automatically reduced during periods of no activity. So basically they're on a detection. At a minimum, all non-residential spaces have automatic controls that turn on, off non-24-hour lighting based on occupancy. At a minimum, 50% of the plants are drought tolerant, non-invasive. 32% of the plants are native to Iowa, and 25% of the vegetated areas dedicated to pollinator-friendly plantings or an apiary. Those are a number of things that were called out specific out of the Green Globe process.
Did it have any call out for solar panels or wind energy or anything like that as part of the build structure?
I believe the Green Globe itself does it. I don't believe we've called out anything specific in the agreement.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions for David?
Mayor, I do. David, can you, and I know I'm putting you on the spot here and I apologize for it, can you remind me what kind of incentives we ended up with for the end of 88th Street? I mean, it's similar neighborhood, so to speak. It's a little further down. There were two buildings. One already had the footings or foundation in place. Do you recall what type of incentives we had for those and even approximate square footage?
That one was a 5-year agreement at, I believe, 70 or 75%. That one was a little unique in that because of the foundations in the ground, the value was overly high compared to a greenfield site. And so the increment between the current value and the new value was sort of artificially smaller. Sure. And so we either increased the percentage or increased the number of years. I'm drawing a blank on which. I think we kept it to 5 year, but we increased the percentage to and those are standard office, which are typically 5 year, 50% as are based on value.
And that parcel C in this instance is a 10-year?
It is, yep.
Okay.
Other questions for David? This is a public hearing on this item. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the council? Yep. State your name and your address. You're out of practice. You're out of practice.
Yes, I am. Doyle Sanders, 5325 Northwest 90th Court in Johnston. And I live, that is in the Roughwood area, not Roughwood 4, and certainly not Roughwood, not the specific properties we're talking about here. I just had 2 points that I wanted to make about this proposal and the contract. Years ago, when I drove down 54th Avenue and I saw the West Lakes building at 54th and 100th Street, 4-story building, I thought, whoa, that is a tall building. And that is unusual for Johnston. And then I got used to it. It's a pretty building. It's got the lake in front of it, if you can call that a lake. I assume that's where they get West Lakes. But every time I drive by, I think that's a tall building. And then when I saw this, and I see it's 5 stories proposal, I try to picture the West Lakes building sitting there at 54th and 53rd place and 86th Street. 1 story taller, although I don't know that they compare because one's an office building and one's a residential and commercial building. But there's 1 story on the south, and there's 1 story on the north, and across the street, as you're all aware, is the Goodwill store, which probably has a 2nd level inside of it. But I don't think by any stretch it would be called a 3-story building. And then to the west are 1 story and 2 story residential houses. And that issue seems to be off the table tonight as I look at this agreement. That is how tall the building will be. Because the agreement provides that you get tax increment financing if the developer gets tax increment financing if he meets the minimum requirements, and the minimum requirements in the contract are 5 stories. So apparently, according to the way I read the contract, it could go 6 or 7 stories and still get the tax increment financing. Now, realistically, I don't imagine that's going to happen. But there's no provision for going lower than 5 stories. In other words, that seems to be locked into this agreement in order to get the tax increment financing. That leads me to my second point, and that's about tax increment financing. I was talking to one of you, I called a couple of you and talked about this, and you mentioned that, well, they get tax increment financing because have rental units and they're kind of run down. And I'm trying to think what houses, but there were some rental units there. 3 of them have been torn down, admittedly. You couldn't tell by driving by that they were run down or in any way. So I looked at the packet tonight and I see the urban renewal plan that I don't know when this was passed. Was it in May maybe, or maybe before that? I don't know. But I look at it and it says the city finds the following blighting conditions. Well, what's a blighting condition? That's in the page before. Blighted area is defined, and I'm not going to read it. It's all before you. I didn't see any of those qualifications for blighted area as being applicable here, except that it mentions substantial number of slum, deteriorated, and deteriorating structures. Well, then I go back to that conversation. The rental units which have fallen into disrepair. Maybe that qualifies as blighted properties. But to go on, the urban renewal agreement says residential properties in Roughwood 4 are dilapidated. Well, drive down 50 or 88th Court and 53rd Place and try to find a dilapidated house. But regardless, and out of repair for several years. What again, are those the ones that were the rental units? And they are served by rural water service provider that does not meet necessary fire flow requirements to readily accommodate redevelopment. Well, that's the same water development unit group that I get my water from. And so I'm wondering, is my property also dilapidated because we get fire service from water service from a company that can handle fires. So I talked to the fire chief today, and he says, no, that's really not an issue. And as I checked it out tonight, the two houses on parcel C have 5 fire hydrants within a block or two, well, between 89th and 86th and 89th Court and 86th Street. There are 5 city water hydrants. So I don't think that qualifies for this property to be considered dilapidated, and maybe saves my own. The chief assured me that we had plenty of water if we have a fire on 90th Court. But so I look at this and I'm thinking, I think there's been some bootstrapping done here, because those parcels that were rented and had fallen into disrepair were the parcels that were purchased by LSJT. And so it would appear to me that LSJT purchased the buildings, they rented them, and they fell into disrepair, although you couldn't tell it by looking at them on the outside. And so then they qualify for tax increment financing. It's a little bit like the orphan, or the murderer who was convicted of killing his parents and throwing himself on the mercy of the court for being an orphan. But tax increment financing is also not an issue here tonight. It's not on the table. The site plan must be approved. I just heard Dave say that we have to approve the site plan. But it seems to me like you're locked in to a 5-story building if you approve the agreement tonight. And the site plan has the discretion of the people approving the site plan, or excuse me, let me reword it. The people approving the site plan have no discretion to build anything or to approve anything less than a 5-story building. And I go back to my first point. I just can't see a 5-story building sitting in that location. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to address the council on this item? If not, we will close the public hearing then at 7:38. Dave, did you have any follow-up to what Mr. Sanders shared with us?
Just a couple clarifying things. The agreement does specify as a minimum improvement a 5-story structure. There is a planned unit development zoning district in place for this property that does have maximum height requirements in it. This building, as sort of indicated in the development agreement, would fall under. There are restrictions or requirements that it has to be at the west-facing side of that building. As you go up, there has to be a staggered height to it, so the 5-story won't go all the way to the western facade of that building as it's adjacent to the residential. So there's a stair-step approach that's laid out in the existing PUD requirements. As to the water main, when redevelopment was proposed here, this is served by a private water service. There was some concern that drawing fire sprinklers in a commercial structure and pulling off hydrants, that there might be a capacity issue for the amount of water needed in a commercial fire. And so the requirement was put in place of the developer that they would have to extend and loop city water main through the development with fire hydrants, and their fire connections are made to that public main. And so it's a public main. It's a part of our public water system now that does provide a loop throughout the development that will bring extra protection in particularly in a larger commercial fire where water resources are very critical. So I don't believe any other follow-up necessary. I did fail to mention, we did receive one written comment, and that was attached to your staff report from a resident from Urbandale, provided some comments specific.
And the factors that went into determining that this would be appropriate for being a TIF district and providing TIF, that was all obviously discussed with legal counsel
Correct. Yeah.
make sure that
these,
we were in compliance with state law.
yeah, as I talked about in the last public hearing, all of these three parcels, and these three parcels are the only ones in Roughwood 4 that are in or ever have been in an urban renewal area. So when it references the Roughwood Plat 4, it's referencing specifically these three parcels. There are multiple structures within the three, but in general, those three properties, they've been historically in an urban renewal plan for well over a decade. As I mentioned in the last public hearing, we did separate these two parcels just strategically to look at sort of separating the type of urban renewal areas that we have along 86th Street versus the existing urban renewal area, which is primarily along Birchwood Court. So they both remain in urban renewal areas, just different districts based on that previous action of the council.
Council have any other questions or comments?
David, this 5 structure you're building, all those are commercial entities?
First floor is commercial. The second and above are residential. There is the ability, I believe there's enclosed parking as well that would encompass part of the lower levels. There are attached to the development agreement on the B5, B6, B7 pages, there are some some general floor plans shown for the proposed structure.
And do you know what kind of apartments are there? Are they low cost or they're luxury?
I would defer to Mr. Scott, who's the developer, to address that.
Thanks.
Hello, Steve Scott. I'm at 6511 North Wynwood in Johnston. I'm sorry, I didn't understand your question.
The question is, are those low cost apartments or luxury apartments?
They'd be more to the upper income targeted customer. We're actually thinking that, so if you look at the package, you'll see that what we've had the architect do on the 4th and 5th floors of the building. We have 11 and 12 foot clear ceiling heights. The idea there being that these are much more high-end units as opposed to rental apartments. Floors 2 and 3 are 9.5 and 10 foot clear heights, which are still, that's a high ceiling for an apartment. But the idea is that the 4th and 5th levels of the building will have balconies, terraces, a lot of landscaping, exterior landscaping on those balconies. So they're really aimed at a more upscale, either renter or occupant. I say occupant because we're actually giving some consideration at this point to making the 4th and 5th floors condominiums that could be purchased as opposed to rented.
How many units are you building on the 4th and 5th?
4th and 5th, currently we show 30 units.
And 2nd and 3rd?
2nd and 3rd, well, we have a total of 60 apartments. So 2nd and 3rd would have 30 per floor, 4th and 5th would have 15 per floor. Now, bear in mind, as David said, the 5th level is stepped back on the west side by, I think, 100 feet. So we lose some floor area there as well. But they're larger units.
Okay. And you had a discussion with the public around the area?
Oh, many.
Okay.
Yes, through the years, yeah.
And we had any kind of a pushback or any conversation?
Not for what we're showing, no. Early on there were, but I think that was mostly related to just the fact of change. Nearby neighbors didn't like the idea of change, but I think they've seen what we've done with the first phase. I think I hope everybody agrees that we've built a very nice product on the corner. And this will be nicer than that first phase building.
Sorry, give me 1 second. I guess there's only one comment, but I think that's all I had questions. Thank you.
Excuse me, I do have a couple questions.
Yes.
I'm not as opposed to the 5 stories as some of the discussion that has been here today. I work up at Iowa State University, and the central campus area is very valuable real estate. And there was, started out, I don't know if you knew this, but there couldn't be any building taller than the Campanile. But there's been pushback to that because of the very valuable real estate. And that if we keep spreading across the limited green, putting in parking lots and taking out the green space because we need more buildings because our college grows, maybe we should consider going up. So for those reasons, I'm not as opposed to going up a story or two, because what it does is conserve the rest of the green space in theory for, our environment. And I really appreciate that you have stated in these documents that you're going to have all these green goals. And I truly do appreciate that. And I will tell you that I'm going to be watching the plans as they come through, and I am going to be advocating for a lot of landscape. And I don't just mean shrubs. I want trees. I want there to be green around this building to put it into scale. So I'm hoping that you can achieve that. And then my only other comment is I do love the renderings. They're very beautiful. They show this plaza green space that faces out to the west, and it looks very attractive. But it's one story up, correct? There's a parking area underneath. Is that?
That's correct.
Yeah.
It's on the second level.
So I wasn't around when 62 West came to the city to be looked at. 62 West is across the street from the elementary school on 62nd. And they have a parking garage on the first level, and then all the living spaces are one level up. To me, I call that the zombie fortress, because there is no, there's some recessed brick, but there's no life at the first level. You have that on the east side of this building, but on the west side, it almost looks like you're a fortress above that those neighboring homes. So what I'm going to say to you, maybe you should talk to your architect and figure out some ways to not have this feel of this upper fortress. Maybe there's some appealing brickwork, artwork, I don't know what, to give it to the scale to the neighborhood. I would hope that you would try and do that. That's my only comment. The building looks beautiful. I hope that you do the green roof. I hope you do consider solar. I hope you do porous paving. I think you could be a leader for future construction in Johnston if you could incorporate these things, and we can tell developers they don't need to be scared of green infrastructure. So thank you.
I would only add to what you just talked about. Were you talking about the west side of the building where it faces exposed to the neighborhood? Yeah, and bear in mind, I think you may not know this, maybe you do, but currently there's a 8-foot tall berm, landscaped berm that is on the west side of parcel A. That also gets continued to the west side of parcel B. So it will be heavily landscaped, and also an 8-foot berm. And then on top of that berm, we're required to have a 4-foot fence, just exactly the same as what we have today. So that's what you're saying is noted, and we've always intended it to be that way.
I think that sounds nice, but there's also, we need to connect people to the landscape and not just float above it. And I know that sounds very artsy and architectural, but I think that we need to make connections to nature and not just be above what's our surrounding environment.
I agree.
Thank you.
Steve, before you wander away, Mayor, if I may, can you comment for a second? Mr. Sanders pointed out interestingly that it is almost restricted to a 5-story building. Can you comment on the fact of if that was open-ended downward, in other words, a lesser amount of floors as far as that development agreement, how would that impact your overall development?
Are you saying if it were restricted to fewer than 5 floors?
Well, I think to some extent, I would like you to comment on that if it was restricted to less than 5. But then even if it was a range, but still allowed that provision for the kind of gradual, I don't know, step or something along those lines.
Well, I'll say the reason that we went to 5 floors with the project was to achieve the level of density that we felt was needed here. And this conversation precedes both you and Mrs. Martin, but and in fact, I think most everybody on the council except for Mayor Dierenfeld. And yeah, and you were here also, Tom. I've always advocated that Johnston as a city needs more density, because we have, when you take out of production the Pioneer land, which I would never do. I love it. But when you take that out of production, that leaves Johnston with very little developable land. And if you're going to do that, then as Councilwoman Martin just suggested, you have to go, there's incentive and reason to go with a higher building because you can achieve more density. And in our world today, density is what drives tax dollars. And so that's the reason that we have always advocated for at this project. And I think I would advocate for more of it in Johnston after this one proves itself as being the right way to go. To go lower would cause us to have fewer units in the building. And this is kind of getting into the weeds of commercial multifamily development. But when you go below 100 units, it gets much less efficient to manage. The costs of management are just not efficient when you get below about 100 units. So that's why we've always tried to hit close to 100. Now, if we in fact go to larger units on the 4th and 5th levels, which is what we're considering doing, this probably comes in at closer to 90 units in total than it does to 100.
I don't want to get into your business pro forma here. It's not our place. But tell me a little bit more about that commercial space on that first floor. It clearly is one of the reasons why I'm, and certainly the Green Globe type initiatives are the second, but it's one of the reasons why I am so supportive, especially of incentive packages, because of the commercial and retail space. How would lowering that number of units then impact, or do you foresee impacting the types of commercial tenants that you could have, or would it make any difference?
It would make some difference, I think. One of the things that attracts tenants to a facility like this is the amount of population that lives in the building, the walkability factor. You get a lot of synergy when you have the type of tenant or occupant that we intend for this building to have. Makes those customers or those commercial businesses on the ground floor that much more viable. And so that's really the whole idea in a mixed use project. So one building isn't going to do it, but I think that, as I just said, if this building is successful, then I would think that we'll see more of this come in Johnston. I would hope so.
Thank you.
I mean, I see no reason that 86th Street, for example, or Merle Hay Road needs to be, at the end of the day, much different from Ingersoll and Grand Avenues. I think that's a very feasible thing to do, but it has to start with one building. And that's what we are hopeful of doing here.
Thanks.
I would just add, I think one reason why, this is a project that has, I think Dave mentioned earlier that the height, the 50-foot height or 5 stories height was established when the PUD was approved. And I think the initial PUD might have been approved before I was on the council, but then we had a modified PUD came back that raised the height to the 5th floor. And I don't remember what year it was. I know we were not in this building. And that was that issue was considered, debated, and we heard feedback from residents, and that was settled, or not settled. You can always change things, but that was approved and set at that point by the council. And so obviously now we're kind of more onto the topic of what the development agreement and incentives looks like. And obviously being a member of the Economic Development Committee, and this is a project we've talked quite a bit about. And I think one reason why I'm supportive of the development agreement that's been put together here is because it is in order to bring the type of development that we want to see in our community, the development that really promotes our values, promotes the direction we want to go as a city. You're not going to get that without providing some sort of level of incentive. And I think we're getting a lot of a beautiful, very unique building that's unique, not just for the city of Johnston, but for the entire Des Moines metro area, and really sort of takes kind of construction of these mixed use buildings to a whole new level, not only in Johnston, but in the Des Moines metro, and puts Johnston at kind of the lead edge of that. And I think that's really important. And obviously being 96th Street, which is a part of our city, which has seen a lot of challenges over the last 5 to 10 years. I mean, we all here have concerns from citizens about the status of the Price Chopper building. And this is a building that's going to be located virtually across the street down the block from the Price Chopper building. And I think the projects like this, other projects that are starting to happen along 86th Street really can help get the ball rolling. And we're doing it as a project partnering with a developer who also happens to be a resident of our community. And I think that's really positive too, because to me, it's really valuable when we have somebody who wants to do a project in our community who is part of our community. It isn't somebody who's come from 6 states away and doesn't have a connection and a belief and a passion for our community, just like all of us do. And so that's why I'm certainly supportive of the project and believe that even though legitimate questions can be raised about it, I think it's the right project and should move forward.
Any other questions or comments?
I'm going to be just the opposite. I can't support this. The last time I remember seeing this, and I can't remember when it was, but I thought the roof garden was open to the public. I thought there was going to be restaurants on the 2nd floor, that the parking was going to be for people visiting the restaurant. I knew about the commercial space on the 1st floor. I knew there was minimal apartments on the upper 3 and 4, but what I'm seeing here, and when I look at the drawing, it says 103 leased spaces. And those on this count are all apartments. And I just don't remember that when the last time I saw this, that it was basically an apartment building. Because to me, that's what this is. It does have some beautiful amenities on the 5th floor, but those are limited to tenants of the 5th floor. The rooftop garden area on the 2nd floor, that is not open to the public in any way. It's got a clubhouse, it's got fitness and stuff attached to it, but it's not something that the whole community can use, which is not what I saw the last time. So I just, according to my memory, and I don't know what changed or when, but I don't remember seeing this before. And I know what it was like to run a couple years ago. I know what our surveys have come back and said. I respect your opinion about density, but in Johnston, that is not what people are looking for.
Appreciate that. I will comment that the design has changed. The concept has not. I just don't know what you would have seen that showed a 2nd floor public garden. That's never been part of the plan. I'm happy to send that to you, the original plan.
I remember that.
I'm sorry, what?
I was all excited about it. I remember that because it was the first. The idea was brought to us before the deal on the way to Grimes. But anyway.
That's never been a part of what I have presented in any form.
Any other questions or comments? If not,
Mayor, actually, I do, and I'd like to direct it to our attorney if possible. Can you give a brief statement as to how, when we declare a TIF district, for instance, I understand and am sympathetic to the fact of it's self-fulfilling prophecy. If you own property and you let it go into disrepair, you in essence intentionally cause blight. And I don't know that that's what's being accused, but at the same point, are there rules within the state or within the TIF language that precludes that from happening? That, in other words, that the owner of property can actually, in other words, cause a compelling reason then to enter into some sort of economic incentive?
I'm not an economic development expert at our firm, so I have some limited knowledge of the topic, though. TIF districts and TIF incentives usually have a mandatory sunset. They can't exceed a certain period of years. So I would say that is sort of the backstop to what you've discussed. It's not like someone can get a TIF and then let their property dilapidate for 10, 15 years and then still get incentives. So I don't know how often that in actuality occurs. Okay. Not to say it's impossible that there might be on occasion something that happens, but I would say that is probably the best sort of protection from that occurring.
I would just point out that the TIF district that I think we approved at the last meeting, which is a slum and blight TIF district, is not just limited to these parcels.
No.
It includes the Price Chopper. It includes several other parcels up and down 86th Street, that whole area. So I think the kind of this to say that the only areas that have fallen into slum and blight are those that are under the control of the developer, and there's some sort of strategy here, I don't think is applicable, because the TIF district includes lots of areas that are not, that sort of fact pattern doesn't exist. So,
and I wasn't trying to indicate that was the case in this. I more wanted a fact basis as to whether or not even legally that was.
And I wasn't alleging that, or I wasn't saying that's what you were saying, but just want to make sure that people understood the distinction there. So,
thank you.
Any other questions or comments, council? If not, do we have a motion to approve resolution number 23-216?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Further discussion?
Mayor, I would like to say that I will be voting in favor of this. However, Councilmember Evans, I don't have any recollection of some of those things that you named. However, I definitely agree with you that the appetite for density is not what I'm hearing as well within this community. In fact, my reasoning for voting for this is, in fact, because of the kind of monumental change in development that I believe is needed along that 86 corridor. I feel like the green environment that will be developed as part of that, and those green features, I think, are beneficial and a good example. But bluntly, especially as it relates to incentives, the fact that it is a mixed-use building and has and provides additional commercial viability and commercial opportunities within 86 is really what it comes down to me. I wish it was more and a heavier percentage of that being commercial than even the residential side, because I know that some of the impacts of a heavily and dense residential facility or building impacts in community services and in school services and in public safety. That's why they pay taxes. But at the same point, it is the commercial entity and the commercial interest, quite frankly, that drives me to want to support this at this point. So thank you for that time.
Any other comments under discussion? If not, we have a motion and a second. Sam, vote please.
Evans.
Nope.
Martin.
Yes.
Burkhart.
Yes.
Cope.
Yes.
Ready.
Yes.
Motion passed. Thank you. Moving on to item 8C, conduct a public hearing on the matter of adoption of plans, specifications, form of contract, and estimate of cost for the Northwest 100th Street reconstruction, Northwest 54th Avenue to Northwest 62nd Avenue, and consider resolution number 23-212, adopting plan specifications, form of contract, and estimate of cost. consider construction bids, and consider resolution number 23-213, making award of construction contract. And we'll open this public hearing at 8:05.
Good evening. On August 15th, the Iowa DOT received bids for the 100th Street reconstruction project. The project is a joint project with the city of Grimes. The project will reconstruct the current 2-lane rural roadway into a divided 4-lane rural roadway. I have up here on the map, 54th is on the left edge of the screen. That'll be the south edge of our project, just slightly to the north of that. And then on the second page of the map, you can see we run the project through Windsor Parkway up to just south of 62nd Avenue would be the limits of that project. We will be constructing a new box culvert there around the Adam Ridge Townhome Pond, as well as we will have trail that runs the entire length of the corridor as well. We did receive, there was 9 bids that were received for the project. The low bidder on the project is Makinich Corporation at $6,588,642, roughly 7% under the engineer's estimate of $75,540, excuse me. Staff and the engineer would recommend awarding the project. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Council, have any questions for Matt?
Matt, do you want to explain to us how much the city will pay for this versus DOT or the city of Grimes?
Yeah, there is federal dollars in the project. So we did receive a grant of $750,000 for the project. And then it is about an 80-20 split between the city of Johnston and the city of Grimes. 80% Johnston, 20% Grimes.
And that comes to how much for city of Johnston?
How much for the city of Johnston? I could do the quick math here, but it's roughly $4.5 million for Johnston and the other $2 million for Grimes. And the grant is split along those same percentages, 80-20.
Matt, I don't see the bid tab form or the engineer's estimate. And I'm sorry, I should have, when the staff materials came out on Friday, I could have asked for that at that point. I just going through it. I always like seeing those bid tabs. And especially even looking through the materials, I couldn't find anything that indicated how many bidders we had or, so I wasn't sure kind of where we were in the process, but just as an FYI, it's always very helpful to have that and being able to compare, okay, here's what the engineer said this would cost and who bid what. So if it might be possible after the meeting to circulate that, that'd be great.
Yeah, actually through the DOT process and their board doc express, they are confidential for the first 30 days. So I can get those out to you after that.
Oh, okay, so because it's a DOT bidding, it's as opposed to us bidding, that's sort of, okay.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Matt, I do have a question and I apologize, but we've gone back and forth about which portion, the north portion or the south portion of Northwest 100th Street would be done first. Remind me which part is going first.
We're back to our original plan of going north and first.
Okay. So it's going to be from 62nd Avenue south to the
roughly Windsor Parkway.
Yeah.
Just shy of Windsor Parkway.
Right.
And then when school would shut down in 2024, we'll do the intersection and then we would move further south.
Okay.
Now, the way the project was bid, once we're able to have a pre-construction meeting with the contractor, we do have the electrical moved on the south end. So it really depends on how aggressive the contractor wants to get. So that is all still up in the air. If they want to come in and they want to try and get a portion of that constructed yet this year, we'll listen to their plan and we can bring that back to council. We will have a public meeting, just as we always do for construction kickoff for the residents along the corridor as well. But they do have some free winter work, which really what we've tried to indicate to them is relocating some of those water mains, some of the fiber optics to get our utilities out of the way so that they could really start construction next spring.
Thank you.
Do you have a rough idea of start date and end date then for the whole project?
The late start date with the DOT is April 30th. And then the completion date, road would be completed. We may bleed over into 2025 with trail and restoration.
Would be by what date in 2024?
It'd be May 31st, 2025.
Okay. That's when you would have projected we would be done. It'd be May of 2025.
Yeah, the road we want to complete in 2024, but we may have to complete the trail restoration in 2025.
So the road part you hope to have done by the end of 2024.
It's not mandated in there to be by 2024, but we have it open in the winter. If we get a bad weather year, we get a wet year, and we get to Windsor Parkway, and we can't get further to the south, we'll shut down at that point and follow up the next year.
Okay, great.
Other questions for Matt, council? If not, this is a public hearing on this item. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the council? Seeing none, we will close the public hearing then at 8:12. Do we have a motion to approve resolution number 23-212?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Discussion. Sam, vote please.
Martin,
Yes.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Motion passed. Do we have a motion to approve resolution number 23-213?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Discussion. Sam, vote please.
Burkhart,
Yes.
Cope,
Yes.
Ready,
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to item 8D, conduct a public hearing and consider approval of the first reading of ordinance 1106, an ordinance amending the official zoning map for 0.84 acres into the center line of adjoining right-of-way from R3 to R2. Subject properties are located at 6216 and 6218 Silver Birch Court, PZ case 23-15. We'll open this public hearing at 8:13.
Good evening. University Enterprises, Inc. has submitted a request to rezone approximately 0.84 acres from R3 medium density mixed residential to R2 low density mixed residential. This property is located at the corner of Northwest 62nd Avenue and Silver Birch Street. This property was recently in front of the council for a subdivision plat a month or two ago, I think it was. Can't recall this precise date off the top of my head. So what's being proposed is the owner is looking to sell the land to a buyer that wants to combine the lots back together to construct a single family detached home. The R3 zoning district does not permit single family detached homes. So that's why this is actually a down zone to allow for that construction. It would not allow for any additional units. It's actually a less intense land use, the R2 versus the R3. This would allow for the property to be developed consistent with others along that Silver Birch Court, Silver Birch Street, more that single family detached styling in lieu of the originally proposed twin home, 2 units with a common party wall. This has been in front of the Planning and Zoning Commission, and they have recommended approval. And we do have representatives of the applicant in the audience. He hasn't ran off yet, so so if there's any questions there, I'm happy to go into further detail or answer any questions. I know I was very, very brief in that synopsis there.
They're making 2 units into a single unit, building 1 home.
Yeah, this action will not change the legal lots. It will still be 2 lots, but the intent is for it to be combined back together for a single family detached. Okay. The zoning change, the reason the R2 is being proposed is the minimum lot width in the R2 is a 50-foot lot width, and these are platted with, I believe it's a 55-foot lot width. The next step down, which would be our R160, has a 60-foot lot width, so we'd be creating nonconformity. So the R2 was the step down that did not create any nonconformities, but achieved the end goal of allowing single-family detached.
And so if this is approved, there will be a follow-up separate item that would combine the two lots into one. That's what is expected.
It's done via a lot tie
Or
agreement.
they could do a lot tie agreement as well. That wouldn't require council action.
I believe the newest draft that we had our attorney draft up, we would bring that back as a consent agenda item, just as
for lot tie agreements.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you would just see that as consent.
But it does. It's I guess the point I was trying to make, but is that still requires some sort of council action to approve that separate from this whole thing.
Yes.
Not that I have any concerns about that, but that's just sort of separate from this process.
Yes.
Okay.
Other questions, council? This is a public hearing on this item. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to address the council? Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing at 8:17. Do we have a motion to approve first reading of ordinance number 1106?
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Sam, vote please.
Pope.
Yes.
Ready.
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Burkhart.
Yes.
Motion passed.
And if I can add one additional item, the buyer of the property has requested council consider waiving second and third reading in lieu of, or in consideration that this is a down zone rather than an up zone. So it's going to a less intense land use. That way they can begin construction on their home in a more timely manner. Staff is supportive of this request simply because it is that down zone versus an up zone. It's going the opposite direction than we normally do. But I did want to put that in front of the council for your consideration.
I'll make a motion to waive second and third reading of ordinance 1106 and to adopt and publish.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Sam, vote please.
Ready.
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Burkhart.
Yes.
Cope.
Yes.
Motion passed. Thank you. Moving on to the consent agenda. We removed item 5U and we'll take that up under non-consent agenda. But with that removal, do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Sam, vote please.
Evans.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Burkhart.
Yes.
Cope.
Yes.
Ready.
Yes.
Motion passed. Let's take up item 5U first under the non-consent agenda. Consider approval of resolution number 23-221, a resolution approving the Pioneer Parkway turn lane improvement construction plans. Matt.
This project is put forward by Penta Partners LLC to construct left turn lanes and a full access into the sites at the corner west side of Merle Hay Road and Pioneer Parkway. That'd be for the former school admin site, which has recently had a site plan approved for a Quick Start convenience store, and for the former Men's Garden Club of America site on the southwest corner. No site plan has been considered by the council, though I would note that one has been submitted to staff for review at this point in time. And then this would also include construction of a left turn lane to go, so you could turn to go northbound onto Merle Hay Road. Staff has reviewed the plans and they are consistent with state urban design standards and city supplemental specifications, and we are recommending approval. Happy to go into further detail or answer questions if needed.
Council have any questions for Matt?
I have some. I had heard about this turning lane, but I had not seen the drawings until this moment. And I don't believe it's any secret that I have strong reservations about what's going to happen to the former Men's Garden Club site. And with that knowledge, I don't know that, I mean, we're going to be designing this median so that you can make a turn south into that garden club site off of Pioneer Parkway, even though there is nothing approved for a driveway there or even where it's located. So I'm not sure that I'm in favor of that because I see what was a nice, beautiful green island that is now just, is that going to be concrete? Those islands now in between the medians, is it concrete now?
There is remaining grass, but we do have the engineer that designed this on hand, and perhaps I can pull you up here to.
And then also, who is paying for all this work?
The improvements are the responsibilities of Penta Partners LLC.
100%.
Yeah, then it would be dedicated back to the city. We would take it over as public improvements with a 4-year maintenance bond. So after 4 years, it would become our responsibility to maintain. 4 years from the date of acceptance.
Good evening, Erin Nolan Dyke, Civil Design Advantage. My address 4121 Northwest Urbandale Drive in Urbandale. Here tonight on behalf of the developer Penta Partners. The median will be grass. That's what we're proposing.
And it's only 4 foot wide, quite a bit of it, correct?
Correct.
And how many trees did we lose?
There's no trees that were taken out for this.
According to the aerial, it looked like there was some.
There's a few trees on the very southern end, but we're keeping those.
And are you saving those?
Yeah.
Southern, or do you mean west?
Or sorry, western end. Apology.
Oh, I didn't think you could save them.
You can, on the removal sheet, they're showing them here on the west end to be saved.
Okay. Well, again, I'm not terribly in favor of this change for a development to happen on that men's garden center, which we have no plans for. I guess I'm just going to continue to think about it.
It's possible to ask a question to Clayton.
Sure.
I mean, if we approve this tonight, and does that in any way commit us to, or in any way reduce flexibility for regarding approval or disapproval or any potential plan for the Men's Garden Club?
I'm not aware of how it would tie your hands at all regarding how you review and consider the Men's Garden Club site. All this would simply do is establish if there's going to be a Pioneer Parkway access point, the location where it can be. It doesn't say that there has to be a Pioneer Parkway entrance, but that is the set location.
And so I think really the driving force behind this item that's in front of us is as much the Quick Star project to the north.
I assumed. Yeah.
And, we as members of the Economic Development Committee had an opportunity to have conversations with Quick Star about their entrances to the property. And as they felt very strongly that they needed to have a full access point onto Pioneer Parkway. And in exchange, they agreed that, as I recall, to limit some of their entrance and exit points and to line those up off of Merle Hay. And so that was all kind of part of that discussion. And so to me, this is really sort of fulfilling those discussions that we had with Quick Star, and that I think ended up making the design of the Quick Star property flow quite well for the community. And so that's why I don't have any qualms with it.
Mayor, may I ask a question of Clayton as well? As Councilmember Cope was jogging all of our memories here, it certainly triggered to me. I believed that there was going to be a condition in place too, because one of the concerns that had come up in the past with regarding a full intersection there is really a safety perspective. We had traffic engineer provide updated data, kind of post-COVID data, but I thought there was a discussion of if at some point the city deemed that this then was not safe, we could remedy that or block that again. Is that still possible throughout this entire process?
David, I might need to lean to you a bit, but I believe that was in the site plan approval for Quick Star.
Yeah, I believe so. these plans and the Quick Start plans met the requirements that were laid out in the traffic study, as far as needing the turn lane on Pioneer Parkway to go north onto Merle Hay. This is furthering what those recommendations required. So.
And to the best of your knowledge, I guess where I'm getting a little confused is from the standpoint of we've got a separate development company who's going to pay for all of this, and they're fully aware that that could be removed at some point in time if safety warranted. I mean, we made the development agreement with Quickstar. All of these improvements are coming from a different developer.
Yeah, I don't know that there was a written development agreement. We'd have to go back and verify that that was a condition on the site plan, but it could certainly be a condition on this one as well. That's typically how we handle that, is condition that.
I pulled up resolution 23-86, which approved Quickstar. In it, I'm seeing condition number 6 reading modifications to Pioneer Parkway and/or Pioneer Parkway median to facilitate installation of a full access are not the responsibility of the city and are to be negotiated between the properties benefiting from construction of the access. Construction drawings shall be submitted to the city for review and approval, and a permit to work in the right-of-way is needed prior to construction. Not seeing anything in here about closing it, should it not be?
If I could provide some comments, Clayton. So it's within the right of way, which the city always has the authority and control over the right of way. So yes, this median cut is happening now to accommodate the full access into Quickstar. But if 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, the city ultimately has the authority to decide what happens within the right of way. So you could barricade that back up. You could make it bigger. You could, if the road might change. So that's always within your prerogative.
Okay. And it would not need to be explicitly stated in any development agreement on
No,
with
they
either
are
party.
dedicating the improvements to the city. They're public improvements. They're yours to do with what you choose.
Thank you.
Clayton, quick question. The northern part of the Pioneer Parkway, there's that, yes, the wrap up. Is that the gate to the Quickstar?
Yeah, that is showcasing the existing southern parking lot of the school admin building, and the new Quickstar entrance would be approximately in that same location.
So the Quickstar could have an entrance up there and on Merle Hay Road, correct? Exit or entrance?
Yeah, their approved site plan includes the southern entrance and one entrance on Merle Hay Road.
So this entrance and exit as well on the same thing on Pioneer Parkway? Entrance and exit on Pioneer Parkway. So entrance on the right, exit out, and they need to take a U-turn to get back onto Merle Hay Road. Is that right, if I understand correctly?
Come in, go right into the site, you can go left out of the site, you can come down Pioneer, go left into the site, come out of this site, pull a left. I think my directions there. Yeah, it's a full access, so you can.
So that exit, they don't have to take a left and they can go across Pioneer to get to Merle Hay Road. Is that what I understand?
That is correct.
So you're making a path up there.
Yeah, so they can come through here and get over to Merle Hay Road. See, they're cutting this median. And then there'll be those 2 left turn lanes on Pioneer. So you can get out of the path of travel for through traffic and wait for your turn to turn.
So how far is that from Merle Hay Road to that intersection, the new intersection?
The distance from Merle Hay to the full access?
But that was something that the city both reviewed that to make sure it was whatever the number was, meets kind of this sort of something that is satisfactory from it.
Okay, so fair enough.
So Clayton, on the site plans that were part of our package, page 5, on the south side of the Pioneer Parkway, it shows an outline of a curb cut into the Men's Garden Center. Is that just, that's not going to happen, correct? We're not going to be building any kind of driveway on that side, correct?
I don't believe that was any plans. Yeah, that was just carryover line work.
Can you use the microphone, please?
Okay, I just wanted to be clear that we weren't making any curb cut driveway access point on into the Men's Garden Center area. And I've compared the site plan that's proposed here with the aerial of the landscaping. And I think you'll be challenged to save those trees that are on the berm with the grading you have to do and the canopy that the trees have. So I think it would be fair to say if there's any tree removal, I would like a 1-to-1 replacement somewhere in the vicinity of comparable trees. If it can't go in the median because of site issues, I'm hoping they'll be somewhere else along the right of way between somewhere in our right of way between the sidewalk and the curb, or from the easement to the sidewalk. Or just give them to the Parks Department and say, here's some trees for you. Make use of them.
Any other comments or questions?
Mayor, I do. Clayton, what happens if, I mean, as best I can tell, and I am a horrible reader of these types of plans. I appreciate all that you do, engineers and economic development and development folks in general. The reality is, as best I can tell, though, there will be a turn lane that will be created out of that median so that someone could turn left or south if they were heading west on Pioneer Parkway. Am I correct in interpreting it that way?
That is correct.
And the hatched area that I see is not is that a painted area? Is that an actual going to be a separation between the rest of Pioneer Parkway?
That's on page 6, right?
Yes, I'm on page 6. The top depiction is what I'm looking at.
That's just painted stripes.
Yeah, separate the travel lane.
It pulls the turning traffic if they're queuing and waiting, provides some additional separation between them and the through movement traffic.
So what if there is no entrance on that south parcel ever? What if I mean what do we do? Do we, in other words, is there means, first of all, so that we don't even build that, and if it needs to be built, then it can be altered? It seems like it would be odd to me if we don't have consideration of what kind of development, or even if there would be an access on that south parcel. Does that make any sense? In other words, I could picture someone coming down there thinking potentially U-turn.
We do have cases like this elsewhere in the community, where we're trying to establish where those access points will be in the future. As the plans are presented in front of you, that would get constructed. So this doesn't really provide a framework to not construct that. So
I guess where I'm going with this though too is I understand what you're saying. In other parts of the community, we have where we're trying to encourage where that access would be. I'm not hearing universal acceptance that folks want, or at least the council wants, a entrance there or at that point on the south. So why would we build it if that wasn't something that was wanting to be encouraged?
don't have a good answer for you,
Okay.
I don't think.
I think Councilman Burkhart has a good point. It's pretty much my point. Why are we taking out a big chunk of that median for turning access into a point that has not had any site plan review, hasn't had any approval? I don't see the need. They can just add it back. Unless there's a reason that drainage wise it wouldn't work.
Add it back as in
no turning lane to the south.
So are you saying that that particular property then won't have access off of Pioneer Parkway, or are you saying
we don't know?
So if I'm hearing correct, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you are wanting to defer consideration of that southbound left turn lane into the Men's Garden Club until such time that a site plan is presented to the council for that site. That way you would have a complete picture.
And approved for and then that would be part of it. Yes.
Yeah, but you want to have that complete picture instead of just a,
right.
For lack of better words, a blank check.
100%. We're facilitating what Quickstar needs done. They need to exit out of their property to the south and be able to make a turn to go east. And you also want to have a way for people coming from the west on Pioneer Parkway to turn into Quickstar. It's fine, but there's no reason to have a turning lane for people that are going west to turn south into the Men's Garden Center. You don't have it.
Yes, I mean, typically communities want to have those access points kind of established, which is why we're showing these turn lanes. This is kind of a joint project between Quickstar and this developer. So as a economy of scale, constructing it together.
Excuse me, the developer of another site or the developer of the Quickstar site?
The owner and developer of the Gardens Men's Club site, as well as Quickstar, are partnering on this project.
Oh.
They're partnering to create one project and share the cost.
I didn't realize that. Doesn't change my mind.
Another benefit of constructing it all at the same time is then we're not disrupting the flow of Pioneer Parkway on multiple occasions. Is that enough reason to go for it? That's your guys.
If I could interject, just because I think it's important discussion right now. Clayton, when do you anticipate the do we have any submittals for the site to the south in the city process right now?
It has been submitted, it's been reviewed, and those comments are back to you. So I'm just waiting for revisions.
We're addressing city comments to come back to the city.
And when do you anticipate that would be presented to the Planning and Zoning Commission, to the City Council?
Tentatively, we're trying to get this on the September 11th P&Z and September 18th council earliest.
Then based on that time frame, I mean, when's the developers, I'm using plural here, Quickstar and the Garden Club, when would they anticipate doing construction of this median? I mean, Quickstar hasn't even started construction yet.
No, but they wanted this median cut done prior to that. So they were hoping to get started right away to kind of meet this construction season.
Okay.
Issues if this was pushed back.
I mean, if you start construction beginning of October, you may not get it paid this year, depending on, I mean, there's, some of the traffic signal, manholes that we have to change up. I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. So they're just hoping to get it done.
So what was sort of the driving force was having it on the agenda tonight was in order to try to get construction completed this construction season
of the road. not of Quick Start.
Right.
Yeah. When is construction of Quick Start expected to be completed?
Did Aaron give you an update on that before you left?
Yeah, our understanding is they're intending to work on demo of the existing property this fall, with construction starting sometime next spring on the building itself.
So it wouldn't have to be completed this year, because construction of Quick Start will not even begin until the spring of next year.
Yeah, I think South, pending approval of site plan, was hoping to get started on their construction as well.
Which the developer to the south would not be able to start a construction if they have a site plan approval anyhow.
Right.
Well, currently, if we want to go forward with this and have a vote, I will be a no. If you want to offer, that you do not do the turning lane into south, into the men's garden center, if you change your drawings, or you say you're going to change your drawings, pending if there is a development plan that comes before the city and we say, okay, then that turning lane could come back. And I'd be willing to vote for it then if there is a plan for the garden center that passes this city council. But current plans right now, I will be a no.
As I mentioned, Quick Start and this developer have partnered on this project. So I guess I can't really say if I can take away one turning.
Right.
Between those two parties.
I certainly recognize that you can't speak for both parties from that standpoint in that joint venture. I am contemplating either we table this so that we can bring it back. I don't know otherwise what action we have other than to vote it up or down. I mean, at this point in time, I'm with Councilmember Martin from the standpoint of I don't see the rationale to be able to put in that south turn lane when we have not universally come up with an agreement that that's where we want to incentivize turning or access without knowing what's going to be on that property. And so it's difficult for me to want to move forward on this plan as strong.
If the item is tabled tonight, that does not mean that it can't be taken up again late in September. It could be taken up at our next meeting if the concerns are addressed.
But I suspect the concerns won't be addressed until the south side.
Well, it sounds like you would have some work to do and the developers would have some work to do between now and the next council meeting. Have it brought up then.
And I would just say that I think this is sort of an indication that there are some concerns about the council, not just about this, but the intended site plan. I don't necessarily share those concerns, but clearly a lot of members of the council do. And I haven't even seen a site plan, so I'm not prepared to say what I think there's a lot of members of the council who are very sympathetic to protecting the integrity of that property. And I think there's a lot of concerns about what has been circulated so far. So I think that's an important message for you to take back to your client.
And you're doing a nice job tonight, so it's not because you're not presenting the information.
No, right. Exactly. Yeah, this is not. I'm not shooting the messenger. Right.
Thought it was.
Right. I think it's just important. Your client needs to understand that.
So is there a motion?
So moved. The
Second.
Table. Yeah.
Second for the table.
Is there any further discussion? Sam, vote please.
Martin?
Yes.
Burkhart?
Yes.
Cope?
Yes.
Reddy?
Yes.
Evans?
Yes.
Motion passed. Moving on to item 7A, consider approval of collective bargaining agreement contract between the City of Johnson and IAFF Local Union number 4835 for July 1, 2023 through June 30, 2024, and approval of August 18, 2023 Memorandum of Understanding between the City of Johnston and IIFF Local 483, setting procedures applicable to firefighters upon consolidation of the City of Johnston and the City of Grimes Fire Departments. Teresa.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I won't open any particular document yet unless you have a question about one, but just to hit the bulleted highlights of the agreement that was reached. We did reach a one-year contract agreement. The wage adjustments will be retroactive to July 1st, 2023. Johnston employees received no wage adjustment July 1st. Grimes employees maybe don't care about Grimes employees. I won't, because it's just our contract at this point. I'll just talk about us. So our firefighters will receive a retroactive payment back to July 1st. The 7% step increases will occur as laid out in the terms of the contract. The classification for the firefighter EMT positions receive the same raise and the same step movement. However, we are eliminating steps 7, 8, and 9 of the pay scale. So with the intent that we prefer our EMTs to become paramedics, so they have less steps in the EMT scale than they will in a paramedic scale. We also had some small language changes, and maybe that's one of the documents I can pull up, but we had agreed previously in one of our negotiation sessions to some tentative agreements, portions of the contract. Those, they ratified that, as well as the new one-year contract agreements that we came upon. It's important that upon the ratification agreement of both the unions and with Johnston and Grimes, that they also ratify a transition plan, our memorandum of understanding regarding how employees will be transitioned from Grimes to Johnston once, or should the approval of the 28E agreement happen by the City of Grimes. The City of Johnston already has approved that 28E agreement. I believe Grimes is considering it next Tuesday, I believe. And then also of importance is that all pending cases in front of PERB, or the Public Employment Relations Board, are to be withdrawn. The only case remaining out there is the negotiability issue, which has to do with the demand that we have so many positions available, and which is creating an overtime issue for us. So that issue is still out there, and once it has reached final resolution, then we'll comply with whatever that determination is. But at this point, that one was left alone. The MOU that was agreed upon talks about the fact that the City of Johnston will offer employment to all the firefighters, the current firefighters in the City of Grimes, that those employees, when they transition to Johnston, will retain their seniority based on their date of full-time hire, and that the employees will come over as a lateral entry. Their current step they're in Grimes will be come over and be in that place in Johnston as well. They'll maintain their accrued PTO and holiday banks, and maintain their current accrual rate as outlined in our collective bargaining agreements. What was of importance to the City of Johnston was that in addition to those benefits transferring without employees, so will their employment file. Therefore, any type of document or issue of note that might be in their file in Grimes will still be in a file that Johnston will now have control of. So that was important to us. It is the intent that all of this will take effect on January 1st, 2024, because that will be the easiest for insurance deductibles and how those occur. So when they're changing from their Grimes health insurance plan to Johnston's health insurance plan, deductibles start over January 1st, no matter what, and we won't have to be paying back people because they'd already met deductibles and figuring out differences in premiums and such. And then one of the things that they required to be in the MOU is that should something in the 28E agreement change that affects the mandatory subject of bargaining, as described in the Iowa Code Chapter 20.9, we agree to negotiate those items to impasse. So although by law we would have had to do that anyway, they demanded that that be in the MOU as well. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. We will begin negotiations on a new contract fairly shortly for the next year.
Also, have any questions for Teresa?
Mayor, can I direct one request to Teresa and Mike? I suppose, first of all, my thanks to you for sticking with this and keeping talking, because I think that's important and a great lesson when at first we don't see an ability to do so. So thank you. And I know that sometimes requires you to take a different route or road than what you wanted. The MOU points out of transition points out that all of that accrued PTO and holiday banked hours move over with those employees. As it's currently stated within Johnston's contract, do we pay out that PTO or that sick leave or other holiday pay upon separation?
Well, yes, we would pay out the PTO. What would happen in this particular case is because they would all be on formula, we would be paying 60% of whatever that PTO bank is, and Grimes would be paying
percentage. Yeah, it's
40%.
about
so whatever
about
the difference is. Sarah and I have talked about that on whether that should have been some sort of liability that Grimes incurs. And we still have to talk a little bit about, not a little bit, we have to talk with our auditors, and I will be finalizing how we want to propose how the books are going to look.
Okay.
And, we'll be doing all of that here in the next 2 months. Probably. Agency fund, we decided it's going to be called an agency fund, right? An agency fund. We're going to set up an agency fund, and so both cities will transfer money from their general fund, their department funds, into this agency fund. And in the agency fund, we're actually going to have regular line items and such for their budget. So we need to see what their banks are. I don't know what their PTO banks are over there. I don't believe, Chief, when did they start getting PTO? Yeah, so they haven't had it like we've had it. And I don't know if they were allowed to carry over vacation. They were able to convert vacation to PTO. So we have to see what their banks are. We've got a lot of data we've got to gather from them, but I know where your head is going. And so we're still working on that.
Okay. When that final obviously, as you establish more policy as to what's allowed, but also after that transition, if we know an overall dollar amount as to what that impact, or I would agree, liability is, I'd be curious to know. And I don't know if there's ways in the true-up process for that to be reflected, but obviously, I think it should be considered as we carry that out.
And just remember, there is PTO that Johnston employees that have on the books today that now Grimes is going to become liable under the 2080. So, there actually could be a true up we have to make to Grimes. Ultimately, it may not be, especially in light of Grimes hasn't been on it long as we have been. And then correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, but in Grimes, they actually receive less PTO accrual than they do in Johnson. It's not exactly 1-to-1.
That only applies to the non-bargaining.
Okay. So the firefighters are the same. Okay. Okay. I just want to say thanks to Teresa, and I know she's not here, but Cindy. I mean, they did a tremendous amount of work.
And Sarah.
Yep. So there's just a lot of work from this team, and I know a lot of time to get us to this point. So I just want to thank them for what they've done. So thank you.
What will be the timetable for, or do we know the consideration by the per board of the negotiability issue?
We have a date for the hearing now, and it will be in December.
December? So that doesn't
expedited.
It is not expedited.
That's what we asked for.
Right, but it's not being.
Well, it's expedited.
Except that we're going to be heard, excuse me, Mike, but we are going to be heard by the per board. Yeah. It's gone. The arbitrator heard it. We appealed it. It's going to the per board.
It was an administrative law judge that heard the case, and that was the expedited part of it.
Okay.
We're now basically, it's not really an appeal, but we're asking for a final determination from the per board. That takes time.
Okay. But there's the potential that won't even be resolved by the time we settle the
Certainly it may not be resolved, and additionally, depending on how that ruling comes, both sides have the right to go to district court and go through that process. So it could take years, honestly, to resolve.
In the meantime, we're going to administer the contract as we see and believe the contract is written and intended to work. So there will be some additional trainings we're going to be providing to our work on this overtime problem.
Okay, cool.
Any other questions for Teresa? Not, do we have a motion to approve the collective bargaining agreement and contract between the City of Johnston and the IAFF local union?
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Discussion. Sam, vote please.
Burkhart.
Yes.
Cope.
Yes.
Ready.
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Motion passed. Do we have a motion to approve the claims?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. Sam, vote please.
Cope.
Yes.
Ready.
Yes.
Evans.
Yes.
Martin.
Yes.
Burkhart.
Yes.
Motion passed. City administrator comments. And we'll start with the item that we left undone for the work session.
Absolutely. So Mayor and Council, included in the work session, item number 3 was kind of our quarterly update on our strategic plan initiatives. So this, if you looked at the report, one thing I would highlight, pretty much everything like the status of all of them remained. There was a little bit of a dip on the numbers that were on track, but that was actually made up by the numbers that were completed. So really no change in any of the matrix other than that change. I think,
Mike, are you working off of which document are you working off of? Is the comprehensive plan report?
Yeah, so if you're looking at the comprehensive plan report, that's what we'll really work off of.
There was 2 attachments to the.
Yep, one's the actual strategic plan that was adopted, but I'll be working off the plan report. And if you want to go back, there's actually a link to the June report in Word docs you can look at. But I'm working off the August 1st. And so similarly, how we gave updates, we're just going to talk through the ones that have disruptions. If there's other questions, certainly feel free to raise those. So on the developing the 5-year master plan, that's I'm the ownership on that one. We continue to work and develop that. The department directors have submitted the request for the 5-year staffing plan to administration. We are now working through and kind of costing all that out. I know this report said we'd have that to council in August. We are now planning to take it to the HR Finance Committee for their review in September, and then we'll bring that to the second meeting in September. And that also will kind of kick off the budget process as we work through and present that 5-year staffing plan. I'm going to turn it over to Dave now. He's going to cover a couple of the projects out of economic development. Say that again.
Which ones are you on? I closed the wrong tab.
This would be 1.2.2, the revitalization of 86th Street, and then the BR&E.
Yeah, the revitalization of Northwest 86th Street. Obviously, tonight we took a big step in the direction of that. We've established the 86th Street TIF back in May. Steve Scott's moving forward with his project now on within that area. Got Raising Cane's under construction, but we still have Price Chopper and a number of other buildings sitting vacant. So I would say we're chipping away at progress, but that will be a long-term direction. As far as the business retention and expansion program, that's one of the items we've tasked Peter with sort of taking on. Adam had been working with him on that before his departure, and I'm continuing to do that. And so we're targeting a fall sort of rollout of that program where we'd start to go out and meet with.
Thank you, Dave. I have the next one that has a disruption. It's goal 1.3.1. This is finalizing the 2080 and associated Johnson Grimes Metropolitan Fire District. As you know, we have approved that 2080. Grimes has told me they will approve that next Tuesday. So we do anticipate that will finalize and hopefully then at the next quarterly report, we'll see a completed item there. Item 1.3.2 is more towards public safety, but the 5-year staffing plan. And like I said, we are planning to bring those forth in September. Strategic plan 1.5.1. This one is a completed status. This was in the building department of hiring the neighborhood inspector. So we have completed that goal. Strategic plan 1.5.2. This is beginning the process for the housing study. So I'll turn this to Dave Wilwarding again.
That was an item that was brought up during the 23-24 budget cycle and wasn't funded. We'll obviously look at that again with our next budget. That is a project that will take resources that only need to be budgeted.
The next two are in the Parks Department. Strategic Plan 1.6.3 is create a dog park, and 1.6.4 is create a sustainability shared position. So I'll turn it over to John.
Good evening. Back at the first council meeting in August, we did approve the service agreement with Snyder and Associates for the development of that dog park. So the work has begun as far as the design concept and looking at that. I will tell you, we probably will have somewhat of a disruption with this project as we move forward. Des Moines Water Works is going to be putting a water main through that area. And because of that, we have to look at both schedules and ensure that we're not going to build something with a dog park that's just going to be torn back out when the water main comes through that area. So that will be impactful. As far as the sustainability position, that one's also being lumped back into the 5-year staffing plan and looking at where that falls in with the overall concept with the staffing. Any questions with those?
Thank you. Thank you, John. The next two that have disruption are out of the library. 1.7.1, this is explore adding an ESL teacher, and 1.7.3 is exploring exploring adding solar stations at the library. I think just with I did talk to Molly. She had no updates on these, and part of it is just with the new director transition caused some of that disruption. The final one that has disruption is 1.8.3. This is developed in Northwest Annexation Facilities and MAD.
Yeah, we're still monitoring the Granger annexation plan and taking a look at that, as well as getting utilities up to that area. So that was just kind of been put on hold for just a moment. So there is.
And then the last one I will highlight is goal 1.9.3, and this is out of communications. One that's completed now is creating the greatest hit talking points for mayor and the community. That was completed and then shared out to the elected officials and department directors by Janet's office. Any questions on the status report on any item that we didn't kind of dive into tonight?
So Mike, when some of these have the icon that looks like a clock. What does that mean? Stopwatch.
So it has to do with the reporting and the timing of when a staff member added something to it. And then when we printed this report, so really you can disregard the clock.
Okay. Right.
So it's one of those things I want to take away, but I can't.
Been there, done that.
If I would have printed the report one day earlier, the clocks wouldn't have been there.
Okay.
So.
Mike, one thing that you did skip over there, and I think we just need to continue to keep it on our radar. There are parts of our community that still don't have access, I should say, to broadband with the same level of choice and same level of speed. That discrepancy seems to be getting more and more frustrating to folks that I hear. I know that that's goal and strategy 1.5.4. Our focus of that strategy was to focus more on ways that we lawfully could try to indicate and mandate that within developments into the home. But I certainly think we need to continue to make sure that we do everything we can for those providers to be welcome, but also to understand what expectations we have for the quality of service.
Would it be helpful if maybe we ask MetroNet to kind of give an update of where they're at, or what else would you would like?
I think that would be fantastic. I honestly would encourage and invite all of the providers who currently provide broadband access within our community to be able to give updates, not only on their current level of status and quality of that, but also what their future growth plans are. I personally have had communications with MetroNet in that capacity because neighbors have approached me saying, when's it my turn? However, I think it would be nice for the entire city to hear that. So thank you.
And I think it's important to hear from those other companies as well, because I mean, frankly, I'm not sure they're making any investment in the community right now.
I agree.
So, I mean, I realize that people may be disappointed with MetroNet, but they are at least appearing to be making investment in the community as opposed to those others. So I think it's important to note.
We'll see what we can do in that regard.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other items of specific note? Otherwise, I have one general comment. There's been a request by a council member in the, was it HR Finance that came up in? That maybe we should this fall kind of reconvene the entire council and just kind of walk through the entirety of the strategic plan and just make sure if we're on target. If that's something the council's interested in, what it would be we'd find another evening non-council meeting night to get together and kind of hold a session similar to what we did last October and November. I'm not thinking we'd necessarily bring a facilitator in it, but just more have a round table discussion.
I'm supportive of that. I mean, last meeting, we didn't have a work session. So my preference would be if we have an open night when we're not doing a work session to do that as a work session.
Okay.
So I would welcome that. The one question I do have is that there are several of these items that, for instance, the library, adding the ESL teacher or the social workers, we didn't put that in the budget. So I'm a little confused if we don't fund something, how does it, I mean, to me, it's hard to make progress on something if we're not funding it. Yep. So that's kind of, to me, one question I've got, but I guess to your point, I think it's always good to be revisiting and kind of seeing where we are. But if we could do it as part of a work session, maybe that would be my personal preference.
So. Yeah, and I think I think to do it right, it's going to take a little bit more than an hour.
Sure.
So that's why we were thinking maybe a different evening.
Fair. That's fair.
We could start a half an hour earlier or something. And I think I was the one who suggested that, that we have these check-ins, not leave it for every 2 years. And I think we continually could talk to each other about visions a little bit bigger than what ends up on these lists of what we can afford. Maybe not so much what we can afford, but what do we want to aspire to? And I know that we all got into this being, it wasn't just because I wanted to attend meetings that I got on the city council. I do have some visions and hopeful to make a bigger impression in a certain directions. And I thought I would love just to have that conversation. If it has to be in a work session, that's fine, because I understand we're public, we have to be responsive to the city and the community. But I do just really want to have a conversation about what are our driven goals.
I think I fully support that. I think it's a great concept. So
I think to your point a little bit, like the ESL is a great example. We're showing it as a disruption. And those things that didn't get funded are shown as a disruption. So we're not trying to hide the fact that.
Yeah. Good point. Very good point.
But Mike, I would also point out that the language there says explore. It didn't say,
have to
hire.
Yeah.
So. Anything else on that item?
I don't have anything else, and I don't have any other updates other than to say we do have a concert series mixtape on Saturday evening, so it should be a good concert as long as it's not 200 degrees outside.
Sounds like we need to dress up in costume.
You beat me to it. Is that like khakis? I mean, that's my idea of a costume. Is
if the mayor and council would like to meet the band, 6:30, you can meet at the south door over here, and there'll be an opportunity for you to get pictures and meet the band if you're interested.
Either.
And then I was thinking does Clayton have an update tonight? For some reason, I thought he did. Clayton's not here, so there's no update.
Short update.
Okay.
Okay. Is that it, Mike?
That's all I have.
Okay. Council member comments. Councilwoman Martin.
You caught me. I don't have any.
Thank you. My only statement would be to the entire community to keep your eyes out. Schedules are changing for kids and teachers and everyone else. And I wish them all the absolute best and learning-filled school year. But also we need to be vigilant to stop for buses and kids and everyone else who's learning new things, even on their way to and from school. So be vigilant, please.
Councilman Cope.
I just wanted to note that over the last several months, our city hall has been being used by the Iowa League of Cities for their executive board meeting. They have had their technology for doing Zoom calls is not as good as ours is, and that we use in the Beaver Creek room. And so we've now had the last 3 executive board meetings. They're in the process of upgrading their technology, but and so it was great. We had our last meeting which happens to be my term on the executive board ends at the annual meeting in September. But so we had the meeting here, and the mayor of Ames and city manager from Sioux Center and other mayors were like, "Oh, this is great! What a beautiful building!" and the whole thing. So anyway, it's been great to have them here for now several meetings. Which then kind of transitions into my plug for encouraging people to consider attending the Iowa League of Cities annual meeting, which is taking place, I believe, September 20th through 22 in Cedar Rapids. So I think it's a great opportunity. I think we can always be learning and gaining, experience from what other communities who are in similar, not every city in Iowa is similarly situated to us, but a lot of them are. And I think we can learn things from Bettendorf or Marion or other cities that are similar to us. And so the league conference is a great opportunity to develop those relationships. So I encourage you, if you have an opportunity to make the trek over to Cedar Rapids, release a little bit of that. So anyway. And then one last thing, I don't know who it was who made the motion to move that item from the consent agenda to the non-consent. I just appreciate it because I think it was really helpful to have that discussion. To me, the consent agenda is for items that are no-brainers, and that clearly was not a no-brainer. So I appreciate somebody catching that and asking that to be put on the non-consent agenda. So whoever you are, thank you.
Councilman Redding.
Yes, I'd like to thank the staff for working through the fire union agreement. I think it took a lot of effort from you guys making it happen. I forget all of those names who did those things. So thank you guys, appreciate it. We always had a good relationship with the union. So I was kind of surprised when this went a little bit lengthy discussion, but we agreed to it. We made things happen. So thank you for the staff making it happen. It's really, really great. Thank you.
Councilman Evans.
Nothing.
I just want to thank staff for your involvement and good work over the last couple of weeks in all of the community activities that have taken place. We've had the Run for the Trails. We've had the Mario Brothers movie. We've had the triathlon, not a city event, but certainly a big event in this community, which involved a lot of our staff. And of course, yoga in the park almost every Saturday, which is starting up again this next weekend. I mean, almost all of these activities require all hands on deck. I mean, someone from almost every department is involved in those events, and they've all, from my perspective, have come off without a hitch. And we just, get lots of very positive responses, not only from our residents who participate in those events, but also from other people coming from other communities who are in Johnston for those events. So you're all doing an amazing job. You're representing us incredibly well. We show just, just exceptional when those activities go on. And so thank you so much for all of your hard work and your commitment to doing the job and doing it well. So really appreciate it. Anything else to come before the council this evening? If not, we are adjourned.
I don't know any costs of this. Okay, that ain't money either. I just want a big check.